And we're live. Hey, Colin. Hey, Allie. Hey, Falcon General. How we doing? I'm late. No. 6 on the dot. What do you mean I'm late?
It was like it's 6.
Am I crazy?
No, it's 6. It says 6
All right.
in the corner.
Colin, you're on the wrong time zone or something. I don't know what's going on, buddy. 6 p.m. on the dot. All right. I'm here today with my former Movement for a People's Party pal, Renee Johnston. Renee, how are you?
I'm good, Ricky. I'm hanging in there. How are you? It's good to see you.
I'm good. We used to do this a lot. This
I
back
know.
and forth on the computer, doing the thing.
Yeah, the thing.
So you were on Franco's show. Shout out to Franco yesterday. Frank Analysis, giving your perspective on what happened at the People's Party. I thought that was a pretty good interview. Honestly, I thought you explained yourself pretty well. I thought it clarified a lot of the confusion that was circulating. I think there's still a lot of confusion, and I think some people were just like, "Yeah, duh, that was my experience." So right. I think there's a variety of different perspectives, and I think we have more to talk about. Somehow, there's more to talk about. For those of you who don't know, we were both part of the New York City area, the New York, Long Island, Hudson Valley hub of volunteers for the People's Party. And we worked together for a while. We did weekly meetings on Zoom, but we'll get to that in just a moment. I want to go back to the very beginning, just so we can walk people through it, because some people are outsiders, and a lot of people, when they hear when they hear people talking about the People's Party, they don't actually get it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what people are fighting about. So I want to go all the way back to the People's Convention. The People's Convention was this big thing online. I think you can still look it up. I think it's still available.
Yeah, you can Google it on YouTube. It's saved on their channel.
Right. So basically, it was a big digital convention with lots of people like Nina Turner, Cornel West, Jesse Ventura, Chris Hedges, tons of people, even activists and organizers and a climate scientist. Tons of people spoke for hours and hours and hours about how we need a third party, a new major party to work for the people. And I thought the message was great. I mean, it's kind of a hodgepodge of people, but it's cool to see that many people committing to something, which you don't always see. So that was an interesting thing for me to see. So I was curious, and I was like, you know what? I'll just get involved, see how it goes. Renee, what attracted you to MPP?
The same exact thing. Literally. I have, and I don't remember if you know that I know Amaya Wasangi, who spoke at the convention. She runs the student portion, Students for a People's Party. I volunteered with her for Brand New Congress, and when I found out she was going to speak, I was like, oh, I have to watch this convention and see what it's all about. And so I did. I sat through the hours and hours of it, and I was excited. Like I was like, this is good. They're talking about different stuff. They're not trying to go along with the same old same. Let's break the duopoly. Let's go. I was really excited, and here we are.
We broke something. It might not have been the duopoly. You ended up with a leadership position. Can you speak about that?
So I did the training for the hub coordination, signed the NDA, which was basically to, confirm that I wouldn't steal anybody's personal data. And then we created the state Slack channel for New York. We initially were going to start, as just New York City, because nobody the coordinating circle was actually clear how to manage the whole New York piece. So they thought it would be easier to just start as New York City. There were 2 other people who did the training, but eventually, they couldn't keep going. Sarah was doing a lot of the media stuff, and then Steve actually just kind of disappeared. Steven, he said, I'll keep coming. I can't really run anything. His business got super busy. So since I was the last person standing who had done the training, and since I had a Zoom account that could go beyond the initial 40 minutes, I agreed to just run the meetings and to try and keep things going. And it was by, it was really by default because I was the only person who kind of said, okay, I'll do it. So I didn't have an official title or anything like that. But, as you know, like I put out the agenda every week and updated things as they were going and, included any information that people needed to have, tried to encourage people to, have those conversations about what we wanted to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job, by the way.
Thanks.
I know you probably feel underappreciated after the past several months.
I don't feel underappreciated by the New York people. You all, I feel like everybody knows that I was trying,
Absolutely. But what I liked about our group, there's many things I liked about our group, to be honest. I thought we were a very cool mix of people. We were very diverse, and I mean diverse as far as identity, as far as perspective, experience, talents. We had just a really good mix of people, which you oftentimes get in New York City. Not to brag, but New York is a melting pot, and you get a good mix of people. But we also had a good camaraderie that we were actually building here, and a team that was actually consistent. Some people came and went, but there was never any conflict that I recall, at least.
No.
And I think a lot of that was because of you. You came in, you kept us on task. We're doing the weekly thing. You gave us the Zoom link. We showed up. If you weren't taking notes, you had someone else taking notes. You made sure those notes were posted so all of us could see it, so all of us were on the same page. We were talking about working groups and actions that we could take as a group. And then we eventually got to the point where we were talking about ballot access. And I think that's around the time when things got a little rough. Would you say that's the time?
Just a little.
You want to talk about the roadblock we kind of hit around that time?
Right. So, it got to a point where, obviously the general election had happened and we were like, okay, great. Now what? What are we going to do? And, at that point, we were really trying to decipher what's the best legal step to take next in order for us to keep moving forward. Like, what kind of legal entity are we going to be? What's the best way to manage getting the ballot access? And I'm pretty sure you remember that we sat down and came up with that list of questions for the CC that we sent to Filatetto. That list of questions, that was basically like, okay, here's what we're thinking. How do we go about doing our bylaws for the state? What are you all going to do about figuring out if we're running somebody for governor? For anybody out there who does not know, contrary to what keeps being stated over and over by Nick Brenna, there are 11 states for which you cannot just fill out a piece of paper and get signatures and get ballot access. Turns out that New York is one of those 11 states. In New York, you have to run someone for governor in 2022 in order to get ballot access in 2024. Not only do you have to run somebody, the person who runs has to get at least 2% or 130,000 votes, depending on the total voting body. So once we discovered that ballot access was not about, getting signatures and that type of thing, that it really required a candidate, we were like, okay, well, who's picking the candidate? What's going to happen? How are we going to make this work? What do we do about congressional races? Because obviously you're not on the ballot. So how do you, figure that piece out? Do we worry about city races? Do we worry about council seats? There were so many different spaces where we were trying to figure out, like, what's the best thing to do next? And as you know, Michael was contemplating running up in the Hudson area for his council seat. And he was literally the only in that we had politically. And when we asked Filatetto, what's the plan from Central as far as running someone for governor, his answer was, we'll know in about 6 months, which I think floored that was the same face you made when I read the answer on the meeting.
I made that face so many times in the last couple of meetings.
So you know, and we were floored because the reality is like, you know, it's New York. And as much as New Yorkers don't like Cuomo, outside of New York, Cuomo is, you know, very, very like well known. He wrote his book, as much of it, you know, whatever with that. But, you know, it's not going to be an easy fight. No matter what, no matter who comes in, it's not going to be an easy fight. So our concern and our voice concern was, you know, if you all don't have a plan, what is it exactly that you think we're going to be doing for the next 3 years? Like, are we just sitting around and waiting for, for information from Central? Like, what is it exactly that, you know, we're expected to do as a group, aside from wait for, you know, the CC to decide what they're going to do as far as campaign goes? Because with their plan, it's very likely that they're not going to run anybody in the state of New York. We don't know.
Right. And as a group, we even talked about potential candidates for governor. We were just throwing it out there just to get the conversation going, right? Zephyr Teachout would be a great person just to run because she's someone that could actually get votes. But there was just no conversation whatsoever with CC, right? The national leadership.
I mean, you know, Phil answered the questions to the best of his ability, and he, you know, he advised us to talk to Tiffany, which didn't happen. She never responded to anything that we sent to her for clarification. And my understanding is she attended that recent meeting when they were talking about the ballot access and essentially, you know, announced that she hadn't done enough research and that there was probably not going to be a way to get ballot access in New York in time for any of the upcoming races, which still leads to the question, like, well, what is it that you want the hub volunteers to do for this? Like, how exactly do you expect people, like, you know, and something I kept saying was, I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to send me out to get signatures, because you know, what's that? You have to run somebody. And New York's also, you know, it's a difficult place to not be in the duopoly, right? Like, it's not a place where running as an alternate party is going to work. It's very, very hard. And because the rules keep, you know, Cuomo changed those rules. It used to be 50,000 to get ballot access. And Cuomo, in trying to make sure he doesn't lose his seat, changed it. And, you know, it's just tricky. And I see Justin's talking about the Green Party, but they lost their ballot access. They didn't get the right amount of votes, and they're fighting right along with the Sam Party, right along with the Libertarians, because that $50,000 limit, that 50,000 vote limit that got raised to 130,000, it really did damage to the ability to run as an alternate party. And you'll remember Isaiah James came onto a call with us and talked to us for a really long time about how this all works and the difficulty that he would have running in his district as anything but a Democrat. You know, now, as we knew, you can run on 2 different ballots, right? So Isaiah James could have chosen to run both as a Democrat and as People's Party. And that would have been a choice that he would have been able to make if we were a party. But, you know, you can't have a ballot line if you're not a party. So.
Right. And yeah. Isaiah ran for Congress in 2018, correct?
He ran in 2020.
I mean,
in New York 9, which is Yvette Clarke's district. And he actually, I think he's officially announced that he's going to run again in 2022. I think it's official. He's awesome, by the way. So
he's pretty cool. He might be cooler than the squad guys. I don't know. They might not let him in. He is pretty cool though. I don't know. Good luck to him. What is MPP's electoral strategy then, from your point of view? You heard more about that.
Right. And this is my understanding, is they are going to select a limited number of congressional races. Those people are going to be preferably Democrats who lost their race in deep blue districts where Bernie won. And then they'll do that, I believe, in up to 15 places, with the hopes that they'll get a handful of winners so that they can have a small number of seats within Congress, because that will help them run someone for president, supposedly in 2024.
But without ballot access in certain places because they didn't do the minimum requirement to get on the ballot. So they can't run people for president in places like New York State, which has a huge electoral count, correct?
Right.
So their approach is more of a top-down approach as far as getting people into seats, not a let's start local and build our way up, but actually let's start a little higher and then shoot even higher, I guess.
Right. And I have no, this is based on multiple conversations that I've had with Phil and Nick and listening on different calls. So, I don't want to speak to, because I don't know. I don't want to speak to like who they're planning on picking and how exactly they're planning on making this work. But I know that I have said multiple times, you cannot create a party this way. You have to start local. And, on the ground, if you have people who are willing to do that work, we could have started. I mean, 2021 is a huge electoral year in New York because all the seats in New York City are up. Like mayor's up, like, all the borough presidents are up. There are all these council seats up. So, right. So there was a lot of opportunity within New York to try and build at least some information about like who MPP is and what we're doing. And that could have been done utilizing these, unique races that are happening in 2021. And my understanding is there's a lot of, conversation about not wanting to run losing races and not wanting to invest into, too many local things. And those are all lost opportunities. There are people who were volunteering for MPP because they wanted to run in their own district and had like a plan, and they were essentially shut down and told, like, we're not, we're not doing this local yokel thing. We've got a plan. So.
Yeah, I mean, we had Edwin that was actually interested in running right here in New York City for city council. He will be running as an independent, but he could have run possibly under the People's Party if they embraced people like him. Right. Yeah. Right.
So, and it's a shame. It's a lost opportunity. And in the places where, so, they've announced that, they're in California and Maine and Colorado. And what people need to understand is all that has happened is they have announced that they are trying to be a party in that state. They still have to gather all of the things that need to be gathered in order to actually become a party. They still have to have the right amount of signatures or the right amount of people who sign up. When they announced California, I was curious because I was trying to figure out, what was happening, and they're not actually on the list. Like, you have to write in that you're going to be People's Party when you register to vote in California. So it's a little tricky. So I don't know what they're doing. And I don't mean this to be like dismissive and mean to the people who are doing the work, but I don't know if the people who are doing the work know what they're working for. Like, I don't know if anybody's fully clear on like what actually is happening.
Yeah, and we had a good hub of people that were all on the same page. We didn't understand their strategy.
Right.
We didn't know how that would impact our strategy locally. I mean, we did know, I guess, it was going to stifle our strategy locally. So we were starting to build this thing without, any plan. And if we're not running this, candidate for governor, then we're building something for the next 4 years for, we don't know. Like that was the big question mark, and specifically in New York. I know every hub is different, every state is different, but New York, the question marks were everywhere, and we tried to convey this message, or at least Renee did for us on our behalf, and we just never got any. There was just no communication, really, and we never got the answers that we needed. So we kind of just hit this roadblock, and we were willing to be like, hey, they're trying to figure it out. There's 50 states. This is a confusing process. It's new for most people. And we were patient. We weren't crazy. There was no, I know there's a lot of people saying that the volunteers were just, this needs to happen tomorrow. No, there was weeks of us having these meetings being like, so we asked them last week, like, what's the strategy? Like, what are we going to do to make sure that all the work we've put in is, for something, not just wasted.
And at the point when this whole debacle with, kicking people out happened, we had just decided, like, we're just going to work on local actions. We're going to communicate with other organizations, figure out who's doing what, plug in where we can as volunteers. So at least there was like physical representation of MPP doing something in New York as like a visible thing. And so, I want to say we had literally just made that decision like the week before or like 2 days before I got booted out. And so, I lost all the, I lost all the access, and it was just bizarre. And I see, and I see this is nice. This setup is nice because I can see the chat when I did. When I was with Franco yesterday, I couldn't see what anybody was talking about. So I had to like watch it, back. And I can see, Ed Lee, and I appreciate that he was trying to do work. I didn't have any say on who was allowed in MPP, who was on what. So, that I feel bad that he feels like people were like pushing him out, but I didn't have anything to do with that. As far as I worked with who was in there, from what I was told. We didn't reach out. As you know, we requested a New York at People's Party email address. We never got it. So we weren't doing any external reach out. We weren't sending emails out to people to say, hey, we're doing this thing, can you join? Because we didn't have a means to communicate with people outside of People's Party with a real email address. So, you know what I mean? So,
yep.
Yeah,
Renee wasn't in there throwing bows. She wasn't kicking people out of meetings. It wasn't dramatic like you might think. Our little bubble was quite pleasant, actually.
Yeah. And we had, some of the people that came in, and I hope nobody gets mad at me for saying their name, but like, Barbara was very involved in the Green Party. And so she had and had run for a seat in something else. So she had full like knowledge of how things worked. We had, Don, who actually knew Zephyr Teach Out, and we were all excited that maybe we could have some means of like having a conversation. It was really, I felt like we at least had the ability between everybody who was participating to, communicate and to try and do something. And, we were going to start, like, I've really gotten involved with the Kingsbrook, they're trying to shut down Kingsbrook Hospital. So I've been helping them to do things. And, to me, you have to do the local stuff. You know what I mean? Like you have to do local stuff. And the only thing that we really needed to know was, okay, what do we need to do legally in order to do the local stuff? Because, Central MPP doesn't give money, right? Like you can spend money on things and they'll reimburse up to $50, right? For depending on what you spend on. But if you really want to be able to sustain and do things, you know, within your state, you have to raise money. You have to be able to do those things. So you have to have some kind of legal entity, which means you have to file the paperwork, which means you have to have a bank account, secretary, a treasurer. You have to have all these things that are set up in place in order for you to be legal. And even that question of, okay, what do we go in as to be legal so that we can start physically doing work, no one could answer. So we were like spinning in circles a little bit.
Right. We were one of 11 states that had very specific guidelines, and we simply reached out for any kind of legal guidance whatsoever, and we got nothing as far as I could tell.
Right.
So,
right.
Bummer. So let's move on to the petition, the famous petition.
The petition
that will haunt us for the rest of our lives, I guess. There's a nice little website that launched today because they knew that Renee was coming on to my first live stream ever, which I think is really funny. I'm going to throw it up there on the screen because I know how to work this thing. And it's petitionmpp.com. And you can go to this website, and this mysterious petition that was kept from the masses is now online and available for you to read. Transparency, democracy, organization and efficacy, authenticity, accountability. These are the things that were mentioned in the petition that we both signed. I was one of the last people to sign it, I think. I heard it via Renee, who heard it via someone else. So I think I was probably 200 and something on the list to sign it. But I was one of the people that did sign this. And Renee is actually one of the people who helped with this website. Do you want to talk about this website?
Yeah. So what essentially happened is the coordinating circle asked us to stop being open about the petition. They didn't want us talking about it anymore. And part of the reason was because we mentioned this financial transparency that we were really looking for. In Nick's eyes, the petition was no longer valid because the financial transparency was already happening on the website. Now, whether you agree or not that the People's Party transparency page is actually transparent about finances is, it's up to everybody's own interpretation. But we did agree to stop pushing the petition to people, to stop gathering signatures, and to just move forward with negotiations to try and make sure that all the things we thought were most important from the petition were met. When conversation about the petition ended up on the national Slack for MPP, it was not because someone who was involved in negotiations posted it. Someone else posted it. That person who went by the name Default and whose picture was like a feminized version of Stalin they basically made it out to seem as if we were, this secret group on Discord who, was doing all this stuff behind the scenes. And it just wasn't at all what it was made out to be. So we agreed that we would we would present a statement, we would put out the petition, we would make sure that it was available for anybody to read. And we took the time, and you'll note it's color coded. You can see where we took the time to say, okay, CC did this to make sure, and they got this thing done. So this is no longer an issue. CC answered this, but we're still concerned about this thing that hasn't quite been done. So we were trying our best to really be clear about where we still had questions and what things still, we wanted to see happen. And that was presented in Slack. And, the next day I got booted out. So.
And we'll talk about that. Uh, I just want to say I never joined the Discord. Like, ever. Like, my first Discord was like Richie Medhurst's Discord. I joined a few months ago.
Discord is very overwhelming, I have to say. I joined Franco's today and I'm already like, oh my God, it's too many servers on my Discord. But you know, the reality is there was a lot of conversation on Discord. And the majority of it was trying to give each other a space to talk. So, you know, there was like a channel if you had pet pictures. There was a channel if you had food pictures. Like, it was very, you know, it was so nefarious. We were so, you know, but it really was the majority of it, people trying to figure out, like, how are we going to make this work? And as people got annoyed, yeah, people would be like, I'm not doing this anymore with MPP. I'm out. Like, I don't want any part of this. I'm done. And, you know, and they would walk away. Now, there was conversation to start a new organization. There was no plan. There's no, I mean, to now it's still trying to be by Joy, to now they're still trying to figure out like what exactly it's going to be. But at the time, it really was just, you know what, we're going to go do something that makes sense because we've invested all this time and all this energy into MPP and we're not getting anywhere. Like, nothing's happening. It's not working. We're not doing all the stuff that, you know, we were really trying and hoping to see happen. So, you know what, if it's not happening where you are, go do it somewhere else and go start it somewhere else. And, you know, for me, that's their right. You know, like if there are 200 people on Discord and 100 of them say, you know what, we're going to go start a new organization. Okay. Like, why is it my responsibility to like go to Nick and say, ooh, these people are starting a new organization? I couldn't for the life of me understand like why this was such a focus, this idea that like people are going to go do something new. Like, okay, they're gonna go do something new. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into more of that in just a bit. I think a lot of the problem with MPP, and maybe it's just from my perspective, and maybe you have a different one, but I think the problem with a lot of it was they were putting the cart before the horse all the time. Like, I feel like they did a great job of rounding up a bunch of celebrities, which is fantastic because they do have pull, they do have reach. You get your message out there if you get people with an audience to back you, which I think is an impressive thing to do because a lot of people can't do that. And they got their message out there, and then it all exploded after the People's Convention last summer, right? And they were onboarding quite literally thousands of people into the party, which is a huge undertaking. But the problem was there was no structure in place to have these thousands of people onboarded into. So they were just flooding into these groups, and there just wasn't, you know, a plan. There was no plan. And I think that's kind of what happened with just about everything during our time. Maybe you have a different outlook on that. But it just
I agree.
You know, they're talking.
It's overwhelming.
Exactly. They're talking about running someone for president 2024, but to get to president 2024, there's so many other things you have to do. But it was always about, you know, the big things and skipping so many important little steps along the way, which are so crucial. And we were learning them as we went. So, you know, and if we could learn them as we went, I'm sure leadership knew.
And this, you know, Ricky, this is something that I think, and it was something that really annoyed me when I watched Jackson on Franco's show yesterday was, you know, he's like, well, you know, they've barely been around for a year. How could they file taxes? They started in 2017. They filed taxes in 2018, 2019, 2020. This is not a new organization. So for me, one of the things that was really annoying was, why don't you have some of this stuff already done? Why did it take a petition for you to start writing out steps that people should be taking when they're in a hub? Why did it take a petition for you to point out to people how to access information on finances? Why did it take a petition to call out the fact that, you know, you said you were going to be a horizontal structure, and then you decided you were no longer going to be a horizontal structure, but you didn't tell anybody that that was the decision. And people literally found out because you switched it on the website, and people were like, where'd this come from? So, you know, all of these things to me are things that should have been done in the 3 years before the convention. I just don't know, you know, I don't know why it seems so strange to people that people were annoyed that this stuff wasn't happening. And they're annoyed that this stuff wasn't happening because the organization had been in existence for 3 years. And how is it that none of this stuff has happened? Like, it was mind-boggling.
Right, and that was a lot of the confusion with people. People were coming into this party at a really high rate last year, and they came into this party where leadership was already in place.
Right.
So thousands of people were onboarded, and they looked around and they're like, "Oh, that's my leader. That's my leader. That's my leader. Okay, I guess I'll just roll with it." Right. So leadership was in place. So automatically, if you came into the party last year, you didn't have a say in really anything.
Right.
There, you know, and they pitched it at the convention as this. Literally this horizontal kind of structure where everyone has a say. And I think the only thing we voted for was what, the name of the party? Was there something else? It wasn't much.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, that whole name thing. So there were a number of things that happened that I think people don't realize occurred over the course of the petition being released to the CC for review and when things actually fell apart. So, you know, first of all, there was a massive issue in Slack regarding transphobia and conversations. Yes, like these awful conversations that, you know, it ended up spilling outside of Slack that really turned some people off. Then there was the naming thing. And that naming issue was a big problem because what we essentially got was, okay, we have to pick a name and here's the form. And when you went to the form, you either selected People's Party or you wrote in an option for a name. And then they couldn't explain how they were going to pick the names that you were going to choose from. And this was one of the things that I was vocal about because I couldn't understand, why wouldn't you just collect a bunch of names for a time period, 24 hours or whatever, let people select the top 10 from those names, or the top 9, because obviously People's Party is going to be one of the, you know, one of the choices. And then you do a vote based on the narrowing down of those names. But you know, they insisted there was no time and this whole thing. But to me, it was, you know, it was like a rigged vote. Like, if you're either selecting People's Party or putting in your own vote, your own name, if you don't have another name off the top of your head, you're just going to select People's Party. And, right. And like, and again, not to say that People's Party would not have been the name in the end, because that's what people were, that's what they knew, that's what they were comfortable with. I don't doubt that would have been eventually what would have happened. But to me, it was like a fake democratic process. Like, there was nothing real about the choice. There was nothing real about the process, but they pointed to it like, see, look, it's democracy. We let you pick your name, but they didn't really, you know? And so.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. So we're on the same page there. Also, on your brand new website here, if we want to take a look, a statement that you just tweeted about maybe 6 hours ago that went out. This statement, the Black Voters Group statement, this really is kind of a deep dive into a lot of the drama that people have heard about, but, you know, it's a lot of he said, she said. Well, I think this actually clarifies a lot of that drama. And it's really hard to refute the actual screen grabs that people have put together here. Do you want to speak on any of this? I don't want to get, you know, I'm not here.
No, that's fine. You know, so the day that they did what we call the purge, when they kicked a whole bunch of people out, the number that Nick gave me for the total amount of people that were removed from the Slack was 25. Of the 25, 7 were members of the Black Voter Circle. So automatically, problem number one, 7 out of 25 people to be booted out to be part of the Black Voter Circle. That's a really high number, and it essentially decimated the circle. Like, it booted out almost the majority of people who were left. The issue with that was, of those 7, there were 4 people, Black people, binary and women, who were involved in multiple conversations in the Slack with white people who were defending their right to use the N-word. So there was an incident that happened outside of the Slack. It meandered its way into the Slack because the person who actually did use the N-word in Discord was removed. And, they were associated with Default, and Default brought them up in conversation to say, oh, well, the Discord, you kicked so-and-so out as well. But John was kicked out because he thought he could use the N-word, and he couldn't understand why Black people were offended by the fact that he was using the N-word. And so that conversation rolled into the Slack, and there were 2 different threads that involved this. One thread, I actually stepped in and had some role in getting it to stop. I did post the thing that I wrote to John at the time, which was basically to say, like, listen, I understand that you think this is okay, but I'm telling you that you are thoughtless about race. And as a white person with the privileges that you have being a white person, you can't be thoughtless about race, because me as a Black person, I have to think about my race every moment of the day. Mm-hmm. So the conversation did end at that point. And then there was another Slack thread that started later that night that apparently had like 500 and something posts when all was said and done. And then, that was the basis, they said, of like removal, because this Slack thread was out of control, which, if that's what you want to do, okay. But there were a number of white people who jumped in to defend John and to say, like, well, isn't there an N-word pass? And to call people like, class, I don't even remember what they called Steve when he stepped in to try and, defend people, to defend us against this nonsense. But the 4 Black people who were involved in the conversation all got booted out. And there were, I believe, 5 white people who were also engaged in the conversation. And the only one who got booted out was the initial person who, we talked about having said, use the N-word. But I feel like, as a white person, if you jump in to defend that person, then you're just as guilty of his actions than anyone else. Like, you're not, why did they get the reprieve? Was it because, Laura called herself a founding member, or because McCluskey, or whatever her last name, called herself a lifelong member or whatever? Like, why were they allowed to stay in when everyone else was, when we were removed? And frankly, like, I had every right to be upset that there were white people defending using the N-word. Period. Like, there's no.
And I agree. It's something I'm actually going through right now with the Force to Vote Slack. Not to cause more drama, but like, recently I was, I've been kind of quiet in Force to Vote because they did some proposals about a month ago or so in the Slack. I was one of the people that actually went down to DC back in January with Jackson Hinkle, with Franco from Frank Analysis.
Yeah.
Ed was there as well. We actually went to DC. We actually showed up. We did the thing, right? And I joined this Slack, and a bunch of people became leadership. Very unclear as to how they were selected. And recently there was some conflict. Apparently some of it was in a private group. Again, these private groups, it's supposed to be this group thing where we're all on the same team, we're all equal, but there's these private things happening. So there's information that only some people have access to, and there's conflict going on. And they kicked someone out, and I simply just asked, because I had been silent. I'm waiting until they, figure out whatever we're doing with these proposals. Apparently, I have to wait for leadership to figure it out, which is fine. I don't really care. But I just asked, like, what happened to this person? And they're like, well, this person is not working well with people and blah blah blah, and all these excuses. And I'm like, well, there are other people that create conflict in here. So like, who gets to choose who stays and who goes? Who's deciding this? Right. Who are you? I literally, people who are answering me, that they were telling me how it is. I'm like, who are you?
Right.
And someone gave me a monologue like, oh, we're trying to create an egalitarian space. And I'm like, time out. Who are you? Right. I did not elect you. Why are you speaking on behalf of me and other people? If you're trying to create an egalitarian space, you don't exist in this position because I didn't elect you to be in this position. So right. What are you even talking about? That's the problem I have with some of these groups. It's like, you want to be so fair and equal and whatnot, but you really cannot shake this hierarchical thing that you have going on, this whole authoritarian thing that we're so used to in America. I guess it's so ingrained in us that we can't shake it, and we bring it into these other little groups, and we think it's better than what we're coming from, and it just seems like the same thing on a smaller scale. Right. And that's what I'm experiencing there right now. And people were mad that I was just like, what happened and why were the majority of us not part of the conversation. Right. I don't, like, to be honest, like, that person being kicked out specifically, I don't take it that personal. I wish they weren't in that way, but like, it's not about that particular person. It's about how there's no conversation, there's no transparency, there's no group right. consensus. That's right. what really makes me mad. Right. So I'm like, so the way people were talking down to me in their answers, though, when I was just like, what happened? Why did this person get kicked out? And why, like, was there no announcement? I had to figure it out through someone else. And it was like a bunch of unnecessary drama. And they're acting like that person is the only problem. I'm like, no, this whole structure is the problem. That's mm-hmm. That's why there's conflict. Conflict right. happens when some people have power, other people don't. Some people have information, other people don't. Some people feel useless, other people don't. That's where all this conflict comes from. And as long as you're going to keep the structure in place that creates conflict, you're going to have conflict. Right. And I don't know how to tell these people this. It's not equal when you have right. leadership that's not elected and that make these right. decisions on behalf of 1,900 members of a Slack. And I know some of them are not active, and that's fine. But like, that's a lot of people that you're making decisions on behalf of.
But, and think about it. But that's exactly what was happening in the MPP Slack. Like, they'd come in and we found out with everyone else that, MPP was going to force the vote. We found out with everyone else that they had advisory council. And, listen, this is not me saying like, they don't have the right. It's their organization. Obviously they can do what they want. They claim that Nick was elected because the 9 to 11 people who were in the coordinating circle selected him to be the leader. You consider that democracy, then okay, so be it. But when you're speaking for such a large body of people, I don't think it's unreasonable to allow people to ask questions. And what really bothered me was when people ask questions, it would turn into their messages being deleted, responses being deleted, eventually them being deleted. Like, you couldn't even ask a question. Like, you couldn't even say, hey, how'd this thing happen? Because people automatically started jumping on you. And, this thing with, I'll never forget when Carol posted her note that she ended up having to take down because the backlash was so bad, when she said, if you don't like it, you can leave. Like, who does that for a volunteer organization? And frankly, on one of the calls with the petitioners, when they had us waiting for 2 hours to join the Zoom call. You know, Rod made it clear, we're not horizontal. If they want horizontal, they can go get that somewhere else. Like, you know, like these were the answers to the questions we were getting. And I'm sure to some people, it seemed like, oh, well, you know, they were asking for all these things, but we presented that petition in early November, right? And we had multiple meetings. There were multiple attempts to have conversations. We met with the CC multiple times. We met with Nick multiple, you know, I met with Nick multiple times. Like, there was multiple attempts to try and work through all the stuff that we had, you know, questions about, and everything just kept getting pushed off. And then even with the bylaws, first we were going to get bylaws on December 15th. Then it was, no, you're not going to get bylaws on December 15th. Here's our operating, you know, agreement. Like, it was always something that was going to be, you know, coming down the line. And for me, when you have hundreds of people waiting to do work, why don't you have something put together so that these people can do the work? And even the stuff that they put out, like, you saw the hub coordinator guide, it was word vomit. It was pages and pages and pages of like words and no actual direction and I emailed Todd and Phil and offered, I was like, can I take this thing apart and help try and fix this, right? And Phil answered and he was like, oh yeah, sure, here's the Google Doc to make suggestions. I'm not doing that. I'm not sitting down with a Google Doc to submit all the things that you need. Give me access to the doc so I can help you, because no one is gonna read this thing, these pages of word vomit. Like, no one's gonna read it. And so, you know, just every meeting we were saying over and over again, like, we're trying to help. The whole reason we're doing this is because we want to help. We want to make this better. We want to get things working in a way that's going to work with everybody. And, you know, in the end, I really think, honestly, I think when Default posted that thing, they saw an unexpected opportunity to get rid of a bunch of people who were holding them to task and to the fire to do things in a way that was going to work. And they got rid of us. That's how I feel about it. Could be, you know, I'm not in anybody's head. I wasn't on the CC call, but that's my gut.
Right. And what was the pushback? Because there were so many people, because I sat in on one of those calls. I got the Zoom link for some reason. I kind of snuck into one of those calls with the CC and many different hub leaders. I mean, it was a huge call I remember sitting in on, and people were saying their problems, and all the hub leaders seemed to be on the same page. It wasn't some like rogue group of people. It was people across the entire country, people in Oregon, people in Texas, people in New York, people from all over having the same exact issues in their own separate places. And they were all on the same exact page. Without having some big rehearsed thing, you know, this was all pretty organic from what it seemed. So the pushback from the national leadership group seemed to be simply about control. I don't know.
Control in time. They keep saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Like, now bylaws are going to come with the national convention. So is the platform. So is, you know, voted in leadership. And, you know, in my eyes, I'm like, you know, that's a long time from now. What are people doing between now and then? And what happens if you don't get your stuff together? Like, what if in the fall they still only have ballot access in 4 or 5 states? Then what? What happens if Maine decides, you know what? We're not going to sign on with national. Like, we're not going to agree to be part of the national MPP right now. We're going to wait. What happens then? Like, all of this that needs to happen. It's not asking for it to happen just for the sake of asking for it to happen. It's because these are legitimate concerns. Why isn't there a real working group in place so that when people have issues with the CC, you know, when Thomas decides to get on Slack and sorry, Camila, please don't yell at me, and, you know, call out Camila for doing nothing, right? Why isn't there a means to fix that? And so they came back with this nonsense about first, just so you know, the answer about bringing back the regenerative culture circle was no. Like this story that's been told that, oh, they're going to do a vote, that happened after. The initial answer was the CC met and we decided we don't need regenerative culture. And when someone said, you know, well, who's going to police you? Todd's answer was, oh, we'll police ourselves. Like that works real well in the NYPD. So, you know, go for it. Like, stop. You have to have some means of giving people recourse if something's wrong. Like there has to be something in place. And it just, you know, it was this constant circle of them dodging doing what needed to be done so people could be comfortable. You know, I'm glad they have a transparency page where you can go in and you can do an IRS search. But I said directly to Regina, you know, how come you don't just put PDF links? Like the 990 is a PDF document. You know how I know? I'm the treasurer for a nonprofit organization. And one of the things I do every year after the the 990 is done is I upload a link. So when you're on the website, all you have to do is click 2020 990 and then you'll be able to see it. Like, why is that so difficult to make things easier for people to find? Why do they have to do a search? Why do they have to go to another space? Why, you know, and this idea like, oh, well, we did the transparency thing. If you did it, people wouldn't ask the question.
Right.
You know, there'd be no question to ask. And this whole nonsense with this financial working group, we never asked for that. It's not in the petition. We didn't ask for it. You know, Jackson Hinkle was real arrogant last night. Like, oh, well, you know, they asked for this thing and it already existed. Nobody asked for that. Nobody, I don't care who does the finances. I just want to see what's going on. Like, it doesn't, you know, and he seemed amazed, like, well, we talked about other stuff. They did. When he had Annalise, and I won't be mean to her because I've been calling her Analyze on my Twitter page, but when he had, right.
You and the receipts.
I have receipts. Like, they said financial working group like 6 or 7 times. And I was like, why do they keep talking about this thing that nobody asked for? Nobody asked for it. Nobody. And that's the point. And instead of acknowledging that he kept talking about something nobody was asking for, he said, oh, well, you know, we talked about other stuff on the website too. Okay, well, you know what? I linked to the website, this page that, you know, he felt was so transparent and gave so much information, but he didn't even know what year the organization started. Like, stop. He spoke from total ignorance. He's never read the petition, clearly. Clearly, all the information that he got from, you know, about the petition and about what happened with the people who signed the petition was clearly all from Annalise. And she was on the Discord for like 3 weeks. She barely participated in anything. And, you know, some of the stuff she said, you can debunk with her own words from the Discord. Like, you know, they went on a whole thing making fun of people. You know, they wanted bylaws in a week, but in her post on the Discord on November 19th, she says that the CC agreed to present bylaws to be reviewed on December 15th.
Do we have bylaws now?
No.
And by we, I mean like not us, but like,
yeah, like there's nothing. And if you look through all these arguments that have been happening on Twitter, Rod Branagh, who for some reason is part of the financial group and is also Nick Branagh's father, he's like, we have bylaws. We've had bylaws since day one. Okay, well, where are they? Because MPP is a DBA. So if you have bylaws for, you know, your 527, you could just say, like, these are the current bylaws and we're going to have these in place until we write new bylaws. That didn't happen, though.
Womp womp.
Right.
So you get kicked out. It kind of blindsided our entire hub, which has really collapsed. It really has. Some other people took it over, and they have recently stepped down. I think Steve Martinez is trying to do something with it. Good luck to you, Steve. You are brave. You are very, very brave.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying. I wish him all the luck, and I hope he doesn't, find himself spinning in circles a year from now. And I just have to say, Ed Lee, please don't compare yourself to Rosa Parks. Like, you just sound ridiculous right now. Just stop.
Ed Lee, you're like Ed Lee. That's who you are. So even our regional coordinator was Filatetto. He apparently oversaw the entire Northeast, which is a lot of hubs.
Right.
I think he was stretched pretty thin. I don't blame him for a lot of the things that happened. He actually disagreed with how they treated you. He did not vote to kick you out. If I'm correct on that. Yeah. So shout out to Phil. I'm sorry your name gets tossed around in a lot of these conversations, but Phil's all right. He disagreed with the majority of the CC. Did the CC ever fix any of this mess?
Not to my knowledge. No. I mean, I met with Phil and Todd and one of the regenerative culture circle ladies. And then we had that meeting, and then I spoke on the phone with one of the advisory council members and Nick. That didn't go so well. I actually ended up hanging up on him. And then I met again with you all and Phil. And then I met again with Phil and Nick. And in the end, that circular talk of infiltrators and the Democrats and, people siphoning people off to do something new and all those things, that was really, like, to me, a massive, I can't do this with you, because he couldn't let it go. And he's still saying it. Like, he's still calling out infiltration and all this stuff. And so I knew that it was gonna be circular. Like, eventually, if I came back, this same thing was gonna happen again. And that old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I'm just not, I wasn't okay with that. Justin B, just so you know, I certainly pulled down the Green Party bylaws for New York. Won't lie, definitely gonna admit it. Because there were no bylaws to go off of, and they didn't have any information for what we needed to do in New York. And we were trying to figure out how we even start the process of writing bylaws. So I did pull them down, and we had them in our base camp to look at, to try and figure out if we could use some of that as a basis for bylaws. And it's because the national group did not have bylaws for every state that was prepared, and we were trying to do it. So there you go. Just confirming that for you. And just for Ed Lee to know, it wasn't that you're inspired by Rosa Parks. You said I am like Rosa Parks, which is two different things.
I think there was also talk of some kind of data breach maybe at some point. I don't know.
Yes, the infamous data breach. So they did another fake vote on I see Ed's just decided to just be completely ridiculous. So I can't. So they did another fake vote to decide if they were going to move from Slack to Gilded. And it was something that Gilded, actually the best of this is the person who did all the work to present Gilded to the National, who put the whole PowerPoint together, who helped with the research, who did the whole thing, got kicked out too on the same night that I got kicked out. But we'll just leave that there. But so they had did this vote which was a fake vote because they had already decided that they were going to move to Gilded, but they wanted to perpetrate like they were Democratic. So they did this vote about moving from Slack to Gilded. And supposedly the vote got hacked. Supposedly the person had access to information in the database. So they were concerned that it was someone who had access to the Action Network. And that was their big, like, people are stealing our data. And so, we have to kick people out. And had they only kicked out, like, had they removed everybody from Action Network, that would have been one thing. Had they removed everybody, only from the Action Network and left them everywhere else, that would be one thing. But I don't even know how they decided who was the potential problem. And so, like, one person who got kicked out, I know 100% didn't sign the petition, didn't have Action Network access, wasn't running anything, was still trying to figure out like where to plug in. And she got booted because she asked the wrong questions, because her questions sounded like she was a potential infiltrator. So she got booted.
Well, you're not going to like me. Good thing I wasn't very active on those platforms, because I certainly would have been booted. Oh boy. So we've been going for a while.
You know me, I got to get dinner started.
I know you got dinner. I'm sure you have another thing coming up later. So I just have one crazy proposal. All right. Sure. I think we discussed this a little bit, but I'll throw it out there. The room, if you guys want to chime in, go for it. The Green Party, which has been talked about in the chat already, is established. They're experienced. They have ballot access in most states where they haven't been sued by the Democrats, or they didn't come up with the right amount of votes in the new laws, whatever. The Green Party is established. It is a viable third party. Where they fall short are things like marketing, maybe celebrity outreach. Fundraising is probably always hard for a party like the Green Party. And those are some areas that MPP actually does a pretty good job at. They are pretty good at marketing and getting the word out. They are good at somehow connecting with celebrities, and they do have some kind of funding.
Right.
If MPP is super, super serious about a third party, a new major third party that actually, works for the people, why wouldn't MPP at this point, now that they've, lost all trust in their volunteer groups, why wouldn't they just fold into the Green Party and be an arm of the Green Party that specifically works on marketing, celebrity outreach, and fundraising, which is what they do best?
Right. So
just throwing that out there. How do you feel?
I actually don't think that would be a bad idea, but they'll never do that. It's just never going to happen. And I think, and I hesitate to say this because this is just my own feelings on this. I'm not representing anybody here, but I think the people in charge of MPP are really excited about the idea of making MPP happen, right? Like, it's about being a thing, not about doing a thing, if that makes any sense. Because if it was really about doing a thing, then stuff like bylaws and horizontal structure and making sure that, people are able to do the work and things like that wouldn't be a problem. But if you're focused on making sure that everyone knows that, it was you who got this thing to happen, then that's what it ends up being about. And, again, I don't want to be mean about it. And I don't want people to be like, oh, she was trash talking so-and-so, but I can't take MPP seriously because they don't take themselves seriously. Like, it's 100% about presenting a certain thing and looking like they're doing a thing, but not really doing it. Like, one of the things that frustrated me recently was a conversation about reparations. And someone asked, like, why, you don't even support reparations. And somebody wrote back and said, well, what makes you think we don't support, go see our question and answer. But the question and answer didn't say that they supported reparations either. So to me, I'm like, just say we don't want to say we support reparations. But because they're playing a game, right? They don't want to say they don't because they know that's going to look bad. But they don't want to say they do because on the off chance that reparations doesn't fall, it doesn't play out well during their national convention, right? Then what do they do then? Because they've already said they supported it. So instead, they're like trying to walk this fine line, and you can't walk a fine line with people, right? Like, people are people, and everyone has their own ideas on reparations. Like, I fully support reparations, but I don't want to check, right? Actually, I don't even know if I'll get a check because my family's Jamaican. I don't know if how that whole, I mean, I'm definitely a descendant of slaves because we went back, but they were in Jamaica. So I don't know if that works. But I feel like reparations funding could happen the way it happened. There's a town in North Carolina where they're putting the money into fixing the town, like building the school up and fixing infrastructure and things like that. Like, people might think that's a crazy idea, but there are different ways to discuss it and to just have it not be on the table, but then say, oh, well, we're going to talk about it come, going down the line when we get to our national convention. Like, to me, that's just, it's bullshit. So yeah, I don't know. There's so many things wrong, and we should circle back and do this again because this was way less stressful. Not that Franco was stressful. It was.
Oh, okay, good.
I didn't know Franco. I know you. The three of us can talk. I'm good with, I'm really, my DMs are open. I don't have anything to hide. I believe fully, like, the key to all of this is to just be honest. I'm not a good liar. I don't remember things well. So I don't lie because I'm going to forget the lie and then I'm going to have a problem. So I just tell the truth because then you don't have to, you don't have to figure out what you said the last time. And I have my receipts. I have way more screenshots than anybody, definitely. Way more screenshots than anybody realizes. I mean, way back to when I first started with MPP, I sent Carol an email and she sent me a really snotty answer and I was annoyed and I screenshot it because I was like, I don't know why she thinks this is okay to talk to new volunteers this way. And I have that, I have plenty of receipts. So anybody who wants to know, all they got to do is ask, but don't ask if you don't want the truth because I'm going to tell you the truth.
And where can people find you, Renee?
I am on Twitter. I believe it's rjohnston815. I think
I put it in the description too.
Okay, there you go. And then that website, you can do a contact on that website to reach anybody who filled out the petition. So.
And that website, one more time, is right here. That is
petitionmpp.com.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on to my very first live stream. And thank you.
Good job. This was fun, Ricky.
This was fun. See, I'm a fun person. I don't make you feel horrible about your life.
Thanks. And just shout outs and love, Camila, Lisa, Joe, everybody. Thanks for coming on. It was good to see all the names that I knew. Ed, hello to you too, even though you were driving me a little bit batty.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks so much, Ricky. Take care.
Bye.